Probably some of the best news to end 2023 with. In a 4-3 decision, the Wisconsin Supreme Court has just struck down the state's gerrymandered legislative maps, which have unfairly benefited Republicans for the past 2 decades and are arguably the most gerrymandered lines in the entire country. Just to give you an idea of the extent to which this gerrymander has advantaged the GOP, Republicans currently hold a 64-35 majority in the Assembly and a 22-11 supermajority in the Senate, despite it being basically a 50-50 state. Here's an excerpt from the court's petition. In 2012, Republicans won 48.6% of the statewide vote, which yielded a remarkable 60 Assembly seats. When Democrats received roughly the same vote share, they carried 36 Assembly seats. Then from the 2012 through the 2020 elections, Republicans never fell below 60 seats, winning up to 64, or nearly 2/3 of the seats. In 2018, Republicans won 63 seats with just 44.8% of the vote. And look, admittedly, I'm not a math guy, but I'm pretty sure that winning under 45% of the vote should not net you 2/3 of the seats, at least not in anything resembling a democracy. And that's a point that Justice Janet Protasiewicz laid out during our interview just before she won her election. Can you give like a brief overview of the electoral situation looks like in Wisconsin right now in terms of what the breakdown of the state is versus the makeup of the legislature and the congressional delegation?
Sure. So, Wisconsin's a battleground state. We have very, very close statewide elections. Our Governor Evers, won re-election by about 3%. But we elected on that same ballot a Republican United States Senator. We elected a Democrat as an attorney general. We elected a Republican for our state treasurer. So it tells you that we have these very, very close elections. We're a battleground state. But then you take a look at our legislature, and virtually 2/3 of the seats in both the House and the Senate are red. And you say to yourself, how can that possibly be fair? And then you look at the fact that we have 8 congressional seats. We have a delegation of 8. 6 of those seats are red and 2 are blue. So the numbers are askew. Our legislature doesn't get anything done. When you have these very, very non-competitive seats, it certainly engenders more and more partisanship. There's no need to work across the aisle. There's no need to compromise. So I would argue that what's happening with these gerrymandered seats is really a threat to our democracy.
And in fact, building on that, far from engendering any type of bipartisanship, this is actually facilitating more extremism, because those are the only people now, because those districts are already preordained in terms of who the elected officials are going to be. You're just really trying to win a primary at that point and not trying to come together at the end of it. In fact, she was clear-eyed in that same interview about the extent to which these maps overwhelmingly favored one political party over the other. What's the state of the maps in Wisconsin right now?
Well, right now we have amongst the most gerrymandered maps in the entire country. And I've told people I don't think you can sell to anybody that our maps are fair. They are gerrymandered to the point that I think they would really defy reason and defy logic. So we're dealing with amongst the most gerrymandered maps you can imagine. But one of the main reasons I got into this race is because of the threat to our democracy, the utter threat that our very gerrymandered maps have, right, and people's ability to vote and have their vote counted.
But because she was so vocal about these egregious gerrymanders, Republicans actually threatened to impeach her before she'd even ruled on a single case. They were so afraid of the prospect of losing their ill-gotten majority that they were willing to remove a judge from the bench before she even said a single word. They say a hit dog will holler. Their actions here betray exactly what they were afraid of. Here's my Democracy Watch co-host Mark Elias railing against the blatant illegality of that scheme. Why do you presume Republicans led by Speaker Voss backed off of these threats to impeach her?
Because they had no case. Right? They had no case. You can't impeach someone when they've done nothing wrong, right? Remember, they threatened to impeach her before she even ruled on anything.
Right.
And so I think that they made a tactical error politically and a big error legally. The tactical error was, I think that even the right-wing Republicans in the state couldn't find a rationale, there's not enough to grab onto to even come up with the pretense of a reason to remove her. I think the legal strategy, and this is in some ways the same mistake the Republicans made in North Carolina with the independent state legislature theory case, Moore v. Harper, is that, people are willing to tolerate a certain amount of shenanigans in court, but wholesale attacks on the ability of courts to even function as courts, I think, is where they lose popular support.
And of course, to see more episodes of Democracy Watch, make sure to subscribe to this channel. Now, we would be fools not to think that the Republican-led legislature won't do what it always does when posed with the mandate to draw new maps and just draw another gerrymander for themselves. But in this case, the court has already warned that if Republicans are incapable of following the rules, which, here's a hint, they will be, then the court itself will redraw the map. And we've watched this play out in Alabama and Louisiana and Georgia and in other states, and in none of those states were Republicans capable of following court orders, which means that we are more likely than not to see Republicans fail in Wisconsin too, and then the court will ultimately draw the fair map itself. And so now the question becomes, with new legislative maps on the horizon, what about congressional maps? Remember, even in this 50-50 state, Wisconsin Republicans hold 6 out of 8 seats in the congressional delegation. Here again is Mark Elias, signaling some good news on the horizon. Are there any cases filed regarding fair congressional maps in Wisconsin?
Not yet. There was a thought and an emphasis on letting this state legislative case go first, both because those maps are egregiously gerrymandered, but also because that was going to, and obviously did, elicit a very strong reaction from the legislature. But as you know, Brian, I am not shy about suing states for having illegal maps, the illegal congressional maps. So stay tuned.
All of which is to say, this is how monumental even a single election in what would normally be an obscure state Supreme Court race can be. Because Janet Protasiewicz won her race, Wisconsin will now have fair legislative maps and may very well get fair congressional maps, which means women can be assured of reproductive freedom, Wisconsinites will have security that their elections will be administered fairly and free of undue influence from far-right radicals, the climate will be protected, and so much more. When we hear that every election matters, this is proof of exactly that. So in the same way that Michigan has progressed leaps and bounds since enacting fair maps and electing Democrats statewide in that state, look for Wisconsin to continue this new Midwestern trend. Republicans have relied on anti-democratic measures for decades. Now some actual democracy is on the horizon in Wisconsin. Before you go, I need some help. Please subscribe to the channel and do your part to help grow the progressive media ecosystem. I don't do sponsorships or paid ads, I won't ask for money, but just subscribing to this channel goes a really long way, and it helps get the message out to more people. The subscribe button is right here on the screen. You can also subscribe to my Spanish language channel, which I made to reach those crucial Spanish-speaking voters. That link is on the screen too. And finally, if you want to listen to my audio podcast, you can follow that link as well. Thanks so much for watching.